An excellent video for you today. I'm going to be taking a look at the performance of my Noctua NH-U12a at various fan RPMs as well as with just one fan to see how much cooling potential is in here and what sort of clock speeds and wattages I get in there. So I will have the CPU completely unbound and it'll just be pumping out as much heat as it basically can. And with sufficient cooling, it'll clock higher. Without as much cooling, it'll clock lower. And we'll see what kind of performance we get. This is part of my ongoing fan testing series, where I've mentioned in other videos where at some point you reach a certain fan speed where there's no more cooling you can get through your radiator. And there's just a certain amount of heat soak that a radiator can take. And this will be specifically for this radiator. Other ones will have different performance values, but it will give some sort of idea. We'd have to test every single radiator in the market with every single fan to just kind of see. All right, and welcome to Computer Tech and More. Enjoy the video. I'd like to take this opportunity to also remind you to subscribe to my channel if you like my content. And as well, check out my Patreon page. It is from supporters and like you that help make all of this possible with my acquiring test equipment and me devoting the time to make these videos as informational as possible. Thank you very much. The microphone will basically be sitting, like I demonstrated, basically in the middle and fairly close to the center there, so it should be picking up both sides of the airflow. I'm going to have my front fans set to their absolute minimum RPM as well as the bottom fans. The case side will be open so that basically we're just looking at how much air can be pushed through there, because if the front fans are pushing more air can potentially get in there. We want to just make it as simple as possible. And I'm going to be testing all of this out after I finish with these with the best fans that are 120 millimeter fans that I've done for my roundup of testing so far, with a pair of BeQuiet Silent Wings 4 Pro fans to see what the absolute maximum we can get is. I'm just going to be using my handy dandy anemometer. We're going to just put it right at the back. If the second fan is not there, I'm going to put it, right there. So the anemometer reading for the second fan, well, it will be the actual performance or amount of air that is coming out of the back of that fan, but it isn't the airspeed that is inside the hunk of metal, basically, because the air gets accelerated through the fan. In order to actually get the readings of the air in the fan, I'd have to have this in a air-sealed type box with the anemometer in the middle and then the fan on the other side of it, all pressure sealed, so essentially it'd be sucking the air through. That'd be the only way I can think of to actually get that reading, and I just can't do it. So take some of the airspeed readings, especially for the two-fan scenario, with a grain of salt. But I'll have the airspeed coming out of the radiator with just one fan. And we'll have some noise data from my microphone. We'll have airspeed, we'll have temperature, we'll have wattage, clock speed, average taken through Windows Task Manager, as opposed to trying to average out the various clock speeds of each of the CPU cores, because they tend to fluctuate. It'll bounce around from core to core to core to core to core to core to optimize. So that's kind of an unrealistic way to do it. So we'll be doing it that way. One fan radiator noise. Cooler performance versus airspeed test. Two fans running. Same test, same setup will be used for one fan as well. Two fans going through the radiator, or heatsink. And yes, oddly enough, two fans did appear to be quieter, although it's got more of these peaks in it than one fan. But it was quieter, so I don't know. Silent Wings for one fan test. BeQuiet Silent Wings for two fans. Well, I must say these BeQuiet fans, particularly in the back position, makes a terrible noise on my Noctua cooler. Now, it may be different with different radiators or different coolers because they have different spacings in the fins, so how tightly packed they are. But on this particular one, I mean, just take a listen. That's at 50% PWM for the maximum, so approximately 1,600 RPM. So actually a fairly reasonable amount. I mean, a little high, but fairly reasonable. At 40, it almost goes away. At 30% at that, it really goes away, and those speeds are 1,200 RPM for 30% at the most extreme performance mode. So that little slider at the back pushed all the way over. So yeah, I might do one more set of testing with a Noctua in the back and the BeQuiet in the front. And before you ask, yes, I think it's purely the fans. It may have also been rubbing up against the grill because now it's completely silent. So it could be a couple different things where just something on there was rubbing slightly up against it, or it could just be the spacings of this grill really is not compatible with these BeQuiet Pro 4s, Silent Wings Pro 4s. BeQuiet in the front in HS mode, maximum RPM around 2,500. Noctua A12X25 in the back, maximum RPM around 1,100. So pretty well equalized. Before we get into the graphs of the data, this is the raw data I collected. So temperatures versus different fans. So PWM power signal is that. The CPU clock speed that I registered, and this was in Task Manager, so it's the average between all the cores. The temperature that was recorded, so that's TJ max basically. The wattage as recorded in Hardware Manager, and so that would be the CPU wattage as opposed to like the AA wattage, which was also reported. Note that this will vary based on your CPU model and other criteria. It may not actually be true wattage, but it was kind of what was reported so that I can relate each of the fans to each other, basically this value. Next is the fan RPM as reported. The air speed I recorded at the end of the radiator, or heatsink, and the noise that was recorded just because we might as well take that value in. And the noise was in the middle of the heatsink itself. So this is the same sort of thing, except for the BeQuiet fans in ultra high speed mode. And then down here are for two fans, push-pull configuration, one in front, one in back. So the airspeed is recorded at the back of the back fan. So it may not be the airspeed going through the radiator, but it is the airspeed that came out the back of the fan, and the maximum wattage that I received. So they're not the one fan versus two fan are not directly comparable airspeed to airspeed. But I have it here. And then the last one for two fans is a BeQuiet in the front and a Noctua in the back, just because I might as well check it. And this was in the HS high-speed mode as opposed to the ultra high-speed mode, so that the RPMs would be closer to matching between the Noctua and the BeQuiet. And the wattages associated to each of the air speeds, clock speeds, and that sort of thing. So in every situation, the CPU would hit 90 degrees, and then if there wasn't enough airflow through it, it would begin losing clocks to then basically keep the CPU from overheating. So that's how I did all these tests with each of the different criteria. So let's take a look at the graphs. All right. So this blue line represents the average. So I took the BeQuiet 1 fan and the Noctua 1 fan and basically made a formula, averaged them to get an estimated airflow versus clock speed, actually wattage. So wattage is this, airspeed is this, so that in future graphs, when I talk about how fast the airflow is going through it, I can have a little diagram at the bottom saying, well, wattage is more or less associated with that kind of the air speed. So they're not exactly the same, but I can get a average value, so an estimated value. And we're talking plus or minus like 10 watts, not like plus or minus 50. So for example, right here, I believe this green is BeQuiet, and the red line there is for Noctua. So right there at the green, clicking on it again, is 182 watts for the same airspeed. Well, I don't have one exactly the same, but that's like 194. So there's a 10 watt range. These two are much closer. That's like 206, and if I can even click on it. But you get the idea. So we get this chart of as you increase airspeed, you get more wattage out of your CPU, and wattage is related to clock speed. But then it begins to level off as you essentially can't push more air through it. You can't dissipate the heat fast enough. And the theoretical maximum for my CPU, the 11700K, is about 250 watts. So there's that. And then this graph plots the same thing. This is my composite average of the two fans, and then this is for the two fans in push-pull configuration. So you can kind of see it kind of levels off at that 250 watt mark. So one fan, I got an estimated, sorry, I'm bouncing around, estimated, and this would require an airflow of about 3 meters per second, which is, I think, around what I got for the T30. So you really need a lot of air pushing through it. So, but you can sort of see how that all levels off. And then this last graph is comparing each of the wattages versus clock speeds, and you can see even this creates it's got a linear section, and then it's got a like parabolic section where it starts to curve and level off, because at some point you can't get really much more clock speed out of that CPU. But I just want to do this little test so that I could update my graphs, because I commented that at some point you can't cool down a CPU faster. At some point your airspeed is so fast that you're not going to get any more clocks out of it. And for my air cooler, it is about 3 meters per second, or 250 watts, which equates to about, I don't have that on here, which equates to about 4.6 gigahertz, thereabouts. So we'll have this information updated on future graphs for approximate wattages for airspeed, so that when you're taking a look at my data, you can quickly tell approximately, at least from, again, this is from my cooler, what sort of wattage you can anticipate from it. And again, I want to reiterate this. Every cooler is a little bit different, so just because I'm getting one set of data doesn't mean you can strap this fan onto your whatever brand cooler and expect to get the same sort of heat capacity dissipation from it. But it gives you an idea to how scalable each of the fans are. So one that's only able to push 0.5 meters per second versus one that can push 2.5. You're going to know that you can get significantly more heat dissipation through your particular cooler and increase your clocks, your CPU performance, assuming that it's unlocked. All right, thank you for watching this video. Have a great day. Don't forget to check out my Patreon page, and I'll see you next time.